Okay. Okay. All right, abracadabra. And Ann just slipped out, so we're gonna have to wait for her now. Yeah, where's Jessica?
She's trying to find the keys when we can resolve the recording issue. They locked me out of the.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So we still have an issue. Yeah. Talk amongst yourselves.
Here comes Jessica. Yeah.
Okay. Get it resolved, Jessica? I don't think that says yes.
Your mics are live. Is that?
Yeah.
Your mics are live.
Mics are live if they're on.
Got it.
All righty, so we can go ahead and get started. There it is. So good evening and welcome to Southern Pines Town Council Business Meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. So please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our town manager is not with us, but our assistant town manager, Jessica Roth, is here. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica.
Good evening. On this evening's agenda, the first public hearing we have for St. John Paul, we have received word from both the applicant and the opposing parties that they would like to postpone this hearing another month. So if there's anyone that was here to speak on that one, we will not be having that hearing this evening. We also have a second hearing, which is for Morganton Park South, Phase 2. And we do understand from the applicants that they would like to continue with that hearing this evening. That one was originally opened last month and postponed at the applicant's request. So those are our two public hearing items. And we have a number of action items this evening. The first is a proclamation regarding Parks and Recreation Month. This is declared by the U.S. House of Representatives, and we do have our Town Recreation Parks Director, Cindy King. She's here to receive the proclamation. And if you're not familiar, her team, they have planned a number of great activities that are publicized on their social media for the town to celebrate Parks and Recreation Month. And she's got a lot of different ways that you can do that. Following that, we have a couple of votes on the architectural compliance permits that council heard at last week's agenda meeting. The first is for Ace Hardware. The second is for Discount Tire, and then there's a third for Old Morganton Park South. And then we have a brief consent agenda where council will be setting a public hearing for an annexation for a phase of Pinehurst Surgical Clinic. And that hearing will be next month on August the 9th. And then we have a set of council meeting minutes for approval. And at this time, unless there are any questions from council, we're ready to start with our public comments.
Thank you very much. I do want to mention that the Town of Southern Pines has a Facebook page. So thank you all. So like them and you can follow what's going on in town. And I'm not sure who's responsible for this. I know exactly who's responsible, by the way, as I stare at her. But do look, because it is It's been a long time coming, but it is very cool. So anyway, public comments, just remember they're 3 minutes, and if you want to speak about something we have a hearing about, so please wait until that comes up on the agenda. So first thing is public comments. Remember, 3 minutes, and Beth is our timekeeper. And it looks like Dorothy wants to be first. I'm pretty smart, huh?
Thank you. That's good, thank you. Greetings, Madam Mayor, council members, town staff, and Attorney Gill. I am Bertha Brower, 102 Eastman Road. Since returning home in 2010 as a retiree, I've been offering my services to this town and county, along with others, who are committed to making a difference in the lives of those who live and work here. I've had the privilege of serving in a variety of ways with community, public education, and municipal organizations. One such group is the West Southern Pines Community Connectors. I serve as vice chair to Mrs. Mary Spooner Roca, along with 6 other professionals from varied backgrounds and employments. We began our work with the anticipation of having a town staff person assigned to us, a planning and community development specialist. After several months of interviews, Mrs. Rachel Mann began employment on April 11th. We met with her soon after on April 19th and have had meetings, conversations, drive through West Southern Pines, community meet and greet, and she has met with individuals. Rachel has been very engaging, seeks opportunities and resources that will enhance our work in the lives of our citizens, takes initiatives, is compassionate, has gained an understanding of the needs of the community and continues to do so. And she is a forward thinker, but most of all, she understands and appreciates our passion for our community, our neighborhoods. Additionally, she is an effective communicator between our group, the residents, and town personnel. Rachel says she wants to meet many people. She has, and she continues to do so. I am thankful that BJ Grieve, her immediate supervisor, gives her the flexibility needed to succeed in her position. Thank you, BJ. And I am thankful that town personnel are assisting her in gaining the knowledge of policies and procedures, which she passes on to us when we have pertinent questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor, council, staff, for providing us with Ms. Rachel Mann.
Thank you. She's an excellent hire. Anyone else?
Good evening, Suzanne Coleman, 225 North May. In 2009, North Carolina passed a law requiring that all governing boards adopt a code of ethics by January 2011, establishing ethical standards of conduct for elected officials. Southern Pines adopted its code in November 2010. The code includes the mandate that elected officials should at all times act with integrity, exhibit trustworthiness, and treat council members, staff, and the public with respect, honoring the opinions of others even when they disagree with those opinions. That mandate is underscored in the oath of office each elected official takes when they swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States and North Carolina, which includes the people's fundamental right to free speech, including the right to criticize our government and its officials. That right is so important that the legislature mandates that local governments set aside at least 1 meeting a month for public comments during which citizens can voice their concerns. So why am I sharing this? Because last Friday at the close of the Southern Pines Rotary meeting at Hilton Gardens Inn, in front of other Rotary members, one of our council members confronted me to express her extreme displeasure with the remarks I made at last month's council meeting. She proceeded to unleash a flood of criticisms and accusations which are not worth discussing, debating, or refuting here tonight. And let me be crystal clear, this was not an invitation to a dialogue to seek common ground or understanding. This was an unprovoked attack by an angry elected official whose voice was raised and whose body language was so threatening that a fellow Rotarian felt compelled to follow up with me to see if I was okay. What occurred was unwarranted, inappropriate, unprofessional, and unethical. was a breach of the code of ethics and a violation of the public trust. An elected official has no right to confront a constituent over comments made during a council meeting, period. Residents are entitled to express their opinions without fear of intimidation, retaliation, recrimination, or bullying by an elected official. I understand that being a council member is hard work and that it's not easy to listen to constituents' concerns, including their criticisms, but it comes with the territory, and that means that council members should refrain from abusive conduct, personal charges, or verbal attacks upon the character or motives of constituents. What I said last month was that many residents of Southern Pines have lost confidence in this council and its leadership, and that we needed a moratorium to provide council members and staff with much-needed breathing room to assess where we are and where we want to go. I stand by my comments today, but would like to amend it to include a loss of respect for the council. There is no room for bullying on our town council. I will be filing a formal complaint with the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any other public comments? Hearing none, seeing no one else standing. First thing is first thing we have is the public hearing, PD 0422. At the agenda meeting, at the applicant's request, that the hearing be continued to August the 12th. So we are now looking to hear from the applicants. I see that their attorneys are here, or should we just agree that we are accepting their, I think we just need to agree that we're accepting their request to extend. Go ahead.
If I could just add, one, I spoke with Tom Van Camp today, and we have no objection to continuing the hearing on this matter. I would ask that we have a situation on our side now in which Adam Kiker, who's a key member of our team, is going to be on his honeymoon in the first couple weeks of August, I understand. And so if we're able to come to an agreement and bring that to the council, we could go ahead and have it heard. But if it goes, if we're not able to, we would ask that it be held over again to
Okay.
the September meeting.
Okay. I'm just looking for a motion from the council to extend to August and maybe September.
I'll move to continue PD 0422 to the August 9th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
Pleasure of council.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The next one is PD 0722. This was a quasi-judicial hearing. This is Morganton Park South Phase 2, PDP. It's a continuance from June the 14th. If anyone wants to speak that did not attend the June meeting, I need to swear them in. So is there anyone who wants to speak who was not here? You can just stand where you are. If you'll just raise your right hand and respond to the following. There are three, okay. State your name. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give to the board in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Council members, please disclose the following: any site visits, any ex parte communications, specialized knowledge you have of this case, anyone have a fixed opinion that is not susceptible to change based on what they learn at this hearing, whether they have a close family, business, or other relationship with the applicant or affected persons.
No.
Is there an attorney representing the petitioner?
Yes.
State your name, please.
Tom Johnson with the law firm of Williams Muller at 301 Fayetteville Street, 1700 in Raleigh.
Okay, is there an attorney for the opposition? All right, seeing none, I think we can go ahead and get started. So I need a motion to open this hearing. Well, we don't have to motion, it's a continuous, never mind. Excuse that, forget that one. Okay, are we gonna, Pam, are you doing the staff report first?
Just very brief introductory remarks, Mayor and Council. This item, we had two recognized deviation requests, one being a reduction in parking, another one being an increase in the number of dwelling units or the density related to those dwelling units. There was also some discussion that I put before the council about the orientation of the buildings and whether they needed to address the public street or the private street that runs through that apartment development. With that being said, the applicants requested this continuance, and they've submitted nothing to staff in this interim period. I am happy to take questions. At this point, I was prepared to turn this over to Mr. Johnson, who I think is representing the applicant.
Okay. Anyone have it?
Oh, thank you. BJ reminded me that should we reach a vote this evening, staff did prepare 2 drafts of the findings of facts and related motions. One would be if you were inclined towards approval of the request, and the other being if you were inclined towards denial.
Okay. Thank you, Pam. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members of council. As I said earlier, I'm Tom Johnson here on behalf of the applicant. And as you know, last time we really went through pretty much our whole presentation. We did ask for a continuance to just look at some different things and consider it, especially I think a lot of our discussion was focused on density as we concluded the hearing last time. And part of what we did is we, since this had a CDP and now we're doing the PDP part of it, we went back to the developer and just had discussions with the developer about our request for density and that CDP process. And so I'd like John Silverman with Midland to come up here and speak to that, first of all to the discussions regarding density, and then the potential impact on the project as a whole if there's a reduction in density and what that actually means. So if I could have John come up and just speak to that, and then of course I'll come back up here and answer any additional questions you may have and summarize our position.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is John Silverman, Midland Atlantic Development Company, 8044 Montgomery Road, Suite 370, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45236. It's a pleasure to be back in Southern Pines. Thank you. And it's always good to be here. So, Mr. Johnson asked me to address a couple of different things, which I will do as quickly as I can and efficiently as I can. The first is a bit of history of how we ended up at 650 units in the CDP in the first place. That number precedes our involvement in Southern Pines back into the 1990s when this property was first identified as a center of development for the community, and at that time was labeled the Morganton Road Overlay District. That zoning and that approval covered 137 acres and said that 30% of the acreage, or 41 acres, would be developed with multifamily at 16 units per acre, which was 657 units. So when we put our CDP together, we rounded to 650 units for the number for the overall, what at that point was about 95, 96 acres of ground. That's the genesis of how we ended up at 650 units. The traffic impact analysis that we did with our plan assumed 260 units on this particular project that the Zimmer Group has presented for you last month and that Tom is talking about this evening. So we felt at the time that that was the appropriate amount of area that we should have for multifamily to tie into the target part of that project. If you remember, there are a couple of small buildings that connect the target side to the multifamily side and make it an overall mixed-use project. So we wanted to make sure that there was a plan that worked and fit, and we felt that that plan did, and that's why we actually drafted the initial 260-unit plan at that time. The other item that Tom asked me to talk about was the impact of reducing density on the site. If you recall, and I know that you do because you're all over this, the construction of the Parkway Street that extends about a mile long and connects Highway 501 with Morganton Road is a joint effort between our organization and the town through the MSD agreement that this council was kind enough to approve pretty recently, last 2 months. The financial models that were created by Davenport out of Charlotte to support that MSD made assumptions about what development would occur. The first phase of that development that occurred in their model up front was the target side of the project in this particular multifamily tract. In the event either of the densities of those projects were reduced, then it takes the anticipated tax revenue that's going to fund the MSD that we jointly have approved. It would take that tax revenue and reduce it from the starting gates. So in essence, we would be starting funding of the MSD in a hole and have to try to dig collectively, us and the town, would have to try to collectively dig ourselves out of that proverbial hole. So the impact on a reduction in density below what we had all anticipated when we approved the MSD would put additional risk on us and additional risk on the town as the entity that's going to be obtaining debt for that MSD payment for the $6.8 million. So there's a legitimate, there's a reason why we started at 650 units. There's a reason why we had designed initially 260 units on this tract. And there's an impact if we lower density on either of the Target side or the Zimmer tract. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that we made a little mistake when we did the CDP, and we recognize there's a conflict between the number of units projected for the entire CDP and the 16 units per acre based on the amount of acreage designated in our plan. So we realize that may come back to adversely impact us in the future if our unit count goes from 650 units to 450 or whatever the number would be. But it's incredibly important that we start out on the right foot through the first phase of this development. And we're very happy with Zimmer. We had a lot of interest in the multifamily property. They're a phenomenal developer who we've known for a very long time, good history in Southern Pines, building a very quality project. And we're happy to be here and stand side by side with them.
Thank you, Mr. Silverman. Do you have anybody, the people have questions for Mr. Silverman?
So I think I understand that you said that the 16 units per acre were originally considered with the original CDP. Did I understand that right?
Well, the original zoning before us contemplated 16 units per acre for the whole property, which equated to 657. So when we drafted the CDP, we used 650 units as the target, so to speak, multifamily. Yes,
And did you, and at what point, can you identify for me what you've indicated you made a mistake in your calculations. How would you, in your own words, identify that mistake?
Well, I believe Bob Kingston can probably illustrate this better than I can, but I believe there's a chart, a density chart that goes with the CDP, and in that chart, there's one section that says 650 units, and then there's a section that says 16 units per acre. Those two things mathematically don't
Correct,
match up.
correct.
So we recognize that if you take the amount of land designated in the CDP for multifamily or mixed use, and you multiply that times 16 units per acre, you get to something less than 650
Correct.
units.
Okay.
That's the mistake we made in drafting. I think the intent from day one, as I said, that precedes us by 20 years, the mistake that we made in drafting is that we had always intended on 650 units. Somewhere along the line in a pretty complicated project, we dropped the ball a little bit.
Okay, I wanted to hear that in your own words. Thank you very much. And do you have a proposed resolution of that incongruity that's been created by a mistake on your part?
I really don't.
Okay.
At the end of the day, I can't prognosticate what's going to happen on the rest of the acreage. There's a good chance that we won't need more than 450 units on the whole 95 acres.
Right,
So it may be a moot point. In the event that changes, then, we'll have to deal with it at that point. But we don't have a plan today that tells me we need X number of units remaining, but we know that limit is out there.
and I'm assuming that any assertion that you would need X number of units would be based on economic feasibility from your perspective. Is that correct?
I think the rationale at that point there'd be a lot of different factors. Economics would be one of them. Layout, site utilities. We want to make sure that section of road is very active. It's very pedestrian friendly. We've gone to great lengths with the help of the planning department to design an area that is second to none, and we want to make sure that it's vibrant.
Thank you for acknowledging that that was a mistake in calculation. And thank you for coming to us and saying that.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else have any questions?
The Davenport, do you recall the Davenport assumption? You included the first phase was target. Do you recall what part of that assumption had to do with dwelling units?
I don't remember how they assembled the information and how they laid it out, but the first phase of tax revenue was based on evaluation of improvements. The evaluation of improvements was based on the target center and based on the Zimmer project here. And I think it was either done at 260 or 270 units of value. Can't remember the exact number, but it was roughly this density. Did I answer the question?
You are. I'm afraid that we may have to get it back on that information. I'd like to know what assumptions they made. I mean, if we allowed the financial calculation to be on a number that's inaccurate and really not allowable with the outline that we're providing, then we probably need to go back and.
Do we have anything with Davenport? Does someone have that readily available to them? I'm looking to BJ. No.
I mean,
Okay,
we can pull something out. I don't know whether it's readily available.
okay.
We may need to address that at a future meeting.
On this one, so there was a schedule of improvements that started with the first year of service and then grew over a course of 6 or 7 years. So we started with the assumption of what's going to be built on day one. In other words, what should we base our decision on? What's the risk level of being able to make the service payments, the debt payments, for us and for the town? So we started with the assumption that this is the part that we know about, quote unquote, know about, that's going to happen at the beginning. And then we assigned a scheduled development for the rest of the roughly 50 acres of ground. That first phase that we established is kind of the baseline for how much revenue is going to be generated to pay the debt service payments on the MSD. That first phase was based on the full target build-out and the Zimmer plan.
That part I remember, but I don't know I don't remember, I don't have numbers.
Yeah, no, I'd like to look back at
I know
it.
what the scope was. I don't know.
Well, my understanding was that the calculations on the feasibility of this working and the road being paid off was a conservative estimate. And a conservative estimate would have taken into account that 16 units per acre was what was actually in the approved CDP. So I guess I'm concerned if they are approving numbers for financial feasibility that are well beyond what we are thinking was actually going to be built, we have another issue.
Let me speak to that if I may a little bit, because I think what John's trying to say and what you're talking about, I mean, I think I can reconcile that.
You get closer to the mic so people in the
Yeah, I'm
back.
sorry.
That's
I
fine.
apologize.
That's fine.
I think I can reconcile that. What happened when the CDP was approved, the TIA was based on that, and Travis can speak to that, but it was based upon using 260 units on this multifamily parcel. So the whole phase one, upon which the MSD depends, includes a multifamily parcel and the target parcel. And it's a multifamily parcel at the 260 units that it was scoped out to in the CDP. So that's what you're looking at, that kind of density. Now, as John was saying, later, if you want to adjust that density downward as you move forward so that overall, say the density were 16 units an acre, you adjust down that 650, that could happen in the future. But the key point is the feasibility of this moving forward included the target center and a multifamily development of approximately 260 units. We're asking for 269, which is consistent with that.
I think Jessica, you
She's
found
got
it.
something there, and I have a question.
I'm going to get my calculator out, sorry.
Yes, I pulled up the Davenport presentation that has all those assumptions modeled, and the anticipated completion by October 23 includes 220,000 square feet of retail and 270 multifamily units on 13 acres.
That's the 10, I mean, we're asking for 269, 260 is what was scoped out in the TIA. We have the amendment to the TIA that was already submitted showing the 9 units would not have a material impact.
So I guess here's my concern with this. I know we're looking at and I'm looking kind of, I don't know if it's up there, the land use plan that shows the acreage. It's the blue and yellow and purple.
And that was just.
So, and that's where I think you mentioned like 40 acres should have been allotted yellow or blue. 30 acres got allotted. So the numbers are never going to work at 16 per acre to get to the 650. It's not going to happen unless we grant this deviation. Here's my concern. I mean, I see where potentially it makes sense in the yellow. Yeah, let's make it higher density. But I mean, to me, the blue is just going to be another one where you're going to come, oh, we need to get to the 20 per acre to get to the 650. And while that says mixed use, I don't want it to turn into 30 acres of massive 20 per acre residential, which is our risk if we do this, when all we hear about is there's too much density. I don't have to grant you this. It's not mandatory. It just, I see us painting a picture where we're going to have 30 acres of, or be asked to put 30 acres of massively over the 16, which mixed use doesn't, it looks nice on paper, but when you're asking for it, phase 2, phase 3, that's my concern. I mean, and we didn't create the error. I know it happened somewhere along the way. And so that's my concern when I look
The
at
error
it.
wasn't really in the number of units because it was approved at 650. So I think what was mentioned is the error was in the chart that said a density per acre. But
The density per acre is dictated by the UDO. And right now, if you have 13 acres you're talking about developing, then you are entitled to 208 units. And 270 is a long way from 208.
But you're talking about, number one, the whole development, not just the one
About
parcel.
that right now. I'm
Well, I
talking about the
understand.
density in phase 1.
What was approved, though, was for the whole development. And
Based on a mistake mathematically, then that you readily admit is coming from the plan.
But it was a mistake
I pay
mathematically.
a price for that, or the town pays a price for that.
Right. It was in that particular chart, but that's still that 16 per acre was for the whole development, okay?
So you could
We're
have
talking
allotted-
about one portion, so if we do 20 here, then, as John was mentioning, it may be less density per acre as you move forward in terms of the residential amount. So, and it makes sense to put the density here, as mentioned in the staff report, which it supports it, and Bob said the same thing. You want your density where your focus of your development is located. You want it near the restaurants and the retail. You want folks that are going to live there and walk there and not drive in their car to go across town to do something else because you want to reduce that traffic. So to help jumpstart, really the focus of this development and the whole idea from the beginning was 260 units or 270 according to the MSD, but 260 according to the TIA, we're somewhere in between that, was intended to go on this multifamily parcel to begin with because it's the one that's close in proximity to the Target, to the restaurants. I mean, we can pull up the other thing that shows the courtyard that this faces. That's the whole idea. If there's a concern about, the number of residential units as you move forward, that can be adjusted, but it shouldn't go at the expense of this because that's, number one, going to hurt your projections for your MSD, and it's going to hurt the development because you don't have the density there that you need to make it a good, strong, viable development, which was what everybody wants.
So you're thinking it averages out to be correct number? Is that what- is-
650, you can't average it out. If you take 650 and
Possible.
do
That's
it
the reason I'm
across,
trying to
it's a
figure
higher
out
density.
how you're,
But I'm saying you could average it out to 16 units an acre, just have a stronger amount here and adjust it later, which was what John was saying, if you get around 440 units, whatever that may be. And then you have the hard discussion as to whether you want, more density per acre if you divide across the whole development. But this part's critical because that first phase, which is this multifamily and the Target, is critical to the MSD to give you the tax base, to make this a viable project. And it's also critical to the success of this development and having your people next to Target, next to the restaurants, to make it a showpiece for Southern Pines, which was the intent to begin with as well, because some of the colored, if you look at some of the colored concept plans, BJ, you got that color plan that was done with the CDP. I know Bob had it in his slides. No, go up, go further. There was the one.
I got my phone.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have to go to his presentation. But mean, the whole idea being that this was going to be the focal point. And that's where you want your density. I mean, classic planning, whether you ask BJ, whether you ask Bob, whoever, who's a planner, and you can ask Travis with respect to traffic. You want your density so that you can encourage folks to walk and not get in their car. And that's what we're doing here, is putting that density where it's at the Target Center and the restaurants and that sort of thing. Here's that colored plan that was part of the CDP. And then you've got the soccer fields, which after the planning board meeting, we added that connectivity to make sure we had it to the soccer fields. So, and you've got the multi-use path or the linear park that's on the parkway. I mean, all of that is in close proximity to this development, which is not unlike a planned development. I live in a planned development. I've got greenways, I've got sidewalks. People are coming from the adjoining townhomes to walk on our sidewalks and walk on our greenway or our linear park. That's what you want to have happen. That's what you want to encourage. That's the whole purpose of having a planned development. So it's not like we're asking for 20 units an acre of multifamily out away from everything where people have to drive to go to Target or have to, drive to go to the nice restaurants that are going to be here or drive to go to Dick's that's going to be here. I mean, those are the things that you don't want to happen.
BJ, I think I asked this at our last meeting, and I think you told me it's impossible. But there's no way that we could go somehow condition I'm sorry, I was looking at a map that's not, the blue areas to guarantee that that's not going to turn into another crazy over density. It's like, ideally, if this is granted, I want to make sure those other blue parcels aren't the same thing, because that's just like 3 massive chunks, which they could ask for to get to the 650. And so is there any way that we could protect and they're called mixed use on I don't know how to explain it, the land use plan. Is there any way that we could put some sort of condition on the mixed use as to density if this is granted, or is that just like impossible?
The challenge comes in that, I'll use an analogy, you would not condition a special use permit on an amendment to the zoning. You see what I'm saying? So if you're conditioning a PDP on some restriction that is inherent in the CDP, that it gets a little bit backwards. And so, granting a deviation, factually speaking, granting a deviation to zoning as part of the PD process is allowed by the PDO. Conditioning it, and then in the future, looking at keeping a running tally of dwelling units that have been granted within the CDP is something that can be done, similar to the way that open space tallies are kept on PDPs, a little graph on the bottom, say, hey, we've used up 269 of our units out of 650, and this was a deviation. Those things can all be tracked, and so therefore, future projects would come back and you would have the ability to say, no, you're over, or, but ultimately it does come down to this density is a deviation from the twice now referenced section of the CDP, so that's why it's a
And we, as John mentioned, we would be fine with that if we keep a running tally based on the 16 units per acre about where you get.
Yeah, I mean,
that the decision could be made.
But it's going to have to be less since you've already overdone.
If you put 40 acres of stuff, this would be a non-issue to me. Like, clearly, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, we're going to put more here instead of there. But the way that the mistake made, you're 10 acres too less, that doesn't satisfy my concern, because you're still going to put as maximum as you can put. And granting the deviation doesn't in any way balance it out.
But you could, in future applications come forward because of that very concern, you could turn those down.
I think you also have a future concern that you've set a precedent on the first round.
We're having that discussion.
And that may be an argument that I would hear out of you later, so that concerns me a lot. I share Mr. Pate's concern.
But what I'm saying is you establish that precedent now by being clear. That's what we're talking about here in this meeting.
I'm trying to be clear. I would like for it to comply with the UDO.
Is there no way to make the acreage of that yellow multifamily portion 3.5 acres bigger to where you can get the number of units you want on there?
From the blue section?
What appears to me is that
I mean,
you all have pushed out the retail so much that there's very small space for the multifamily, and now you're trying to figure out how to get as much multifamily as possible in that sliver. And I don't think that we need to make the exception. I think you guys can take more acreage.
Or reduce the density.
Because if you look, if you got that blue, can you not creep into from the yellow leading into the blue? I can't tell how big that is. So-
Can I take a
Yeah,
short-
Please.
Yes, go ahead, John.
slightly broad
Thank you.
approach?
Yes.
Never mind. So when this development of this area was envisioned long before we came, it was envisioned for a high-density area, mixed use of retail, office, multifamily. When we assembled the project, we put together the plans to construct the MSP, construct the parkway that creates the site, creates the area. It was done so on an economic model that justified the town agreeing to pay debt service on $6.8 million, and us agreeing to invest, I'll tell you the number, big number, for the project overall. So if we step back from it a minute, for that model to work and for both of us to have a project that succeeds financially, not only for us but for the town, we have to generate income producing, tax revenue producing property. So I realize that it's a bit clunky right now, and I realize that there's a difference between 650 units and 450 units. So Ms. Haney, the answer to your question about taking land from the blue property and moving it into the yellow property, what that does is reduce the revenue we can generate in the blue property, which kind of puts us back in the soup again. So our focus is the MSP starts to be seriously adversely impacted if we start out with the projections that we collectively for Davenport, who we both hired, if we start out taking their projections and denigrating those on day one. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. To address your concern, as I said earlier, I don't know if we're ever going to get to 650. So there's a limit. There's a limit through this multi-tiered approach that's in the approved CDP. Maybe the way to address it is to clarify that the interpretation of that language is it's the lesser of 650 units or 16 units per acre. Just to clarify, and based on that, the council's making whatever decision it would like to make. But I think when you step back from it a minute, we've done a lot of developments in a lot of different places that have multifamily in there. I can't tell you as I drive down the street whether a multifamily development has 20 units per acre or 14 units per acre. The buildings are the same. It just to my eye, you can't really tell the difference. The importance is the quality, and the importance is the quality of the project. So we are very focused on making sure we don't denigrate that quality. But the first thing we do before we even start construction is start to denigrate the quality, or start to denigrate the model upon which we all made our decision to go ahead and build this beautiful parkway. So I recognize it's clunky. I got it, and I apologize for that. And because of that, we may be limited in the future we will be limited in the future to a number of units that are less than we had all envisioned when I was in this room last fall. It didn't occur to us to take the acreage of designated multifamily land and multiply it times 16. But we recognize the limit. We recognize it's the lesser of 16 units. We recognize but we recognize the importance of starting off with a baseline to our project, our collective project, that doesn't start us out in a position where it could be very painful for everybody. So I think that if there's a way, as BJ said, to track the number of units, there's a way to word it to a motion that we're clarifying because there's a conflict with the CDP. And this is how we're basing our decision. I'm fine with that as well. But I'm asking that we take a broader look of a 90-acre project, what we collectively have set our eyes on to design and create for the community moving forward.
What is your I mean, tonight you're asking for a continuance, I understand that, right? Is that correct? You're not asking for a continuance? Okay. You want us to determine tonight whether or not?
What he's suggesting is that you clarify the discrepancy in the per units per acre, the 650, for the entire development. So it won't be precedent going forward, I understand, but we're going to, state for the record, we realize there's discrepancy. But this part was planned to be based upon the Davenport study, based upon everything that was done when the CDP was done. It was recognized this big multifamily was going to be at 270 units, 260, 270 units, recognized. Where the other residential may come from in the rest of the development, and to what degree that will be increased, could be governed by, as John mentioned, the 16 units per acre going forward. And we'll recognize that. And this won't be set as precedent. It'll be designated as a deviation that we're asking for. But going forward, if we can keep that running total, you're looking at when you get to the point that it's that crossover at 400 and some units. And I haven't done the calculation, so I think those are
Yes, I mean, I just did 16 times 30.2, if I had the math right, it's 484 units.
So as we approach that, we can recognize that. That's fine.
I want to do more than recognize it, though. I want to be bound by that. That's the UDO. That's a plan that was put into place long before the Davenport
Yeah, 16 times all of that.
report.
If you're going to do anything, do the density here, which makes sense.
Well, it makes sense to you, but I'm not sure that it makes sense to us.
Well, it makes sense based on Davenport and the MSD. That's what we're trying to pay back money.
Davenport, the MSD, based on the TIA that was done as part of the CDP, all of that was consistent with that many units being here. Now, we do recognize it going forward. I mean, you're effectively looking at a reduction of units in the future. We're fine with that. We're fine with reducing it from 650 to 480.
Yeah, if you peg the number to the 16 times the thing and you want to put more, and that means that you cannot, not that you can just come ask for another deviation, but if that sets that number, I'd be a lot more comfortable with that.
Well, I don't know that I can, I mean, I'm the applicant here, I'm not the applicant on the future parcels.
Yeah.
As BJ said, the difficulty you run is you can't modify the CDP, I mean, that's part of the CDP.
You can, again, you can grant a deviation to what appears to be a restriction built into the CDP for this PDP. You can grant that deviation, so you grant it. Okay, now it's been granted. We still have a standard that you have gross density of 16 dwelling units per acre. Future phases that come in with multifamily, we will still tell them it's 16 dwelling units per acre. They will probably point to phase 2 and say, yeah, but they weren't. No.
Right.
And we will say, well, as we say all the time when we do code enforcement, we say, hey, you're in violation. Well, what about the neighbor across the street? I'm not talking about the neighbor across the street. You're in violation. I don't know what their circumstances are. So you'll have that, we'll do that dance, and then we'll say, sorry, the standard still is 16 dwelling units per acre. If they want to come before you and request a deviation, they may. It is a fact that when you take the numbers and multiply out, it's 483 units. So if in the future, now again, if the applicants were to come in the future and amend the CDP, they can apply to do that, right? They don't have the time to do that right now, probably is my assumption. Don't want to do that right now is my assumption. And I wouldn't want to specifically condition a PDP to approve it based on the fact that an amendment will be done. That gets ugly. It's like it's a reverse order. But if you're comfortable with, really the matter at hand is, are you comfortable with the extra density on this 12.7, 13 acres? Are you comfortable with the additional density on this 13 acres right now for this project, the way it's designed and all the facts in front of you? If you are, then you're looking at potentially approving a deviation. If you are not comfortable with it for myriad potential reasons, then it doesn't work for the deviation. But the matter of density shifting is really not appropriate to be having at the PDP stage. This is one phase of a development. I wouldn't want to set up future generations of planners sitting in the office to have to check through when phase 7 comes in. You wouldn't want to tie their hands to have to go back and look through phases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to see what restrictions there are on 7. They should just look at the CDP. Does that make sense? Because it's compliant with the CDP.
And the CDP is there at the 16 units an acre, so you can do that calculation when future PDPs come before you.
So,
It's not a precedent because we're asking for a deviation, so that's your answer.
So,
The
Mr.
is
Jo-
also right, and what he was saying is it's a different situation.
Mr. Johnson, let me ask you this, and this goes out to you, both you and Mr. Silverman, with my very deepest respect. Do either one of you have any expert or any calculations regarding the threat of the problem with the MSD? Or is that just a blatant statement that you're making with absolutely no evidence presented today?
It's the MSD itself that designated this as having 270 units. So we're not pulling it out of the air. It's the MSD.
So as the MSD would be your assertion right now, that there would not be enough income produced from the MSD that exists right now, correct?
All I can say is the MSD was prepared on the assumption that there would be 270 units, multifamily units on this parcel, and full development of the target site.
And that's prior to the time that you realized that the density proposal was in violation of the UDO, 16 units per acre, correct?
It's when we recognized that on the one hand, it set up as 650 units in the CDP. On the other hand, there was a chart that said 16 units per acre, which was pulled forward from an old plan. And we recognized that when we came, that's why we're asking for a deviation, because
Right.
we recognized that was.
You recognize the discrepancy between the two. But just out of curiosity, to what extent would an extension of Stevens Street into the community, which would increase walkability from the present community, impact this particular discussion?
I can't speak to that. I don't know if John has the ability to speak to that or not. That's more the CDP than the.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is as you develop more property, the tax revenue continues to grow and grow. You can use those monies to do other things. But so there's a clear benefit when you hit that point and you're able to just create a connection between point A and point B.
Right.
Area. I think Ms. Peterson, to clarify, maybe I apologize if I'm not saying it clearly enough, but we collectively, the town and us, we hired Davenport Financial to analyze, will there be enough tax revenue generated within this district to make debt service payments that the town is liable for to pay the debt on the MSD here, on this road. And those models were built on a certain amount of stuff being built, generating a certain amount of taxes. If we say we're going to cut back the amount that's built there, then you are reducing the likelihood that there's enough tax revenue to pay the debt service. So it puts additional pressure on the town. It puts additional pressure on us. My issue and why I'm so comfortable saying I recognize the number to be 450 or 470 units per acre is I don't know if we'll ever build more homes. But I understand the risk today of starting out with one hand behind our back on the MSD. And pardon me, and I understand the pressure that creates for both entities to get everything else going. What I'm saying is, I am comfortable recognizing that we may have a smaller number to deal with if we say 16 units per acre period on those other colors over there. Because I know that we're going to get a head start. We're moving forward. We're starting on a very positive fashion with both these projects, with the quality that's being developed. I'm comfortable that the rest of it's going to happen. Very nervous about saying, before we've even started construction, before we've moved one yard of dirt out there, that we're going to take the model that was done, that we all agreed to, and I was at the presentation with the other building, with Davenport came presented, and we're going to take that model that Davenport did, and we're going to tear it up on day one and say, we're going to start with something less than that. That makes me very nervous.
Maybe we need to have that assumption redone. I mean, it appears clear to me that either we or you or both of us provided incorrect information to Davenport when they were running those numbers. And I would feel more comfortable knowing that we can fit the 16 per acre into the assumptions and actually get to where we want to be. Because if we're saying it's not going to work now, there's no way to control the future as far as the next phases, and it makes me uncomfortable.
I understand, but what you're looking at is future impacts versus current impacts. And so the future impacts, we may not need that multifamily. We may have something else in there that is revenue generating for the town, for the tax base. That means that we don't need that other 107 kids. I think what you have done, if we look at it through a slightly different lens, I think what we've done is successfully, the council would have reduced the density out there of apartments, multifamily, from 650 units to 470. That's a 180 unit reduction in multifamily density in the community. So I think if you look at it from how the analysis is working through itself right now, you successfully reduced density in the market. So if that is a concern or that's a goal, you will have accomplished that.
I guess just I'm not seeing where we can force that to happen because I'll tell you what we struggle with is for a variety of reasons, multifamily is like super popular. We see a bunch of it, and it's a little bit concerning, the pressures, and we hear a lot about growth and density. So anytime we're asked to grant deviation to it, we have to really listen and analyze it. I would love for mixed use to happen. I think that's great. But what we have seen, there have been zoning districts that would have allowed for mixed use, and all we've been approached with are multifamily, 100%, with no mixed use at all. And in my head, I see those blue squares just turning right into that on top of this one, because clearly that's what the market's supporting, because that's what we keep getting asked about. And I don't know, it gives me some pause to put the dominoes in place to allow that to happen when we don't have to.
Well, you're limiting it, if you make the affirmative statement that you're limiting to 60 units per acre, and both those things are independent, 650 or 60 units per acre, so there's less, you're limiting the number of units in the road.
Well, I guess with the
it says up
650, it's
to.
impossible.
Up
And
to
so
60.
even with the limitation, that's going to take several years. Council may be different in 3 years. All you got to do is ask for a 20, we want 20 instead of 16. And 3 years from now, if there's 5 different people and they say, sure, I can't stop that from what I've heard so far, if I'm understanding the process right.
I've got a question.
Because just with the cap, what I was told is there's no way we can pull that cap down from 650 on the big master plan, at least from what I understood.
If I'm following what this council seems to be saying, it looks like we need to go back to the MSD and say, at 483 units, run the numbers again, and it might be instead of 25 years, it's whatever it is, because we're basing all this on something that we assumed. Because I think the higher density makes sense. It does make sense. But, it's like, sorry, give a mouse a cookie, and then we're going to keep on going with this. And, and I know you can't turn yellow into blue. I understand that. But it's just a lot more units than, and granted, yeah, we did say that long ago before this, and that's what MSD was based on. But now that we are aware of the quote-unquote error, whatever you want to say, call it whatever it is, we're kind of at a pause. You can sort of I get the feel from this that I'm looking around, I got 4 people who are going, I don't think that's, yeah. And so if, I don't know, BJ's kind of got the same grimace, but he probably has a grimace for another reason.
If I may, what I'm hearing, please correct me if I'm wrong, because that's kind of the point of why I'm verbalizing. I feel like what I'm hearing is that this project in this location, we essentially have a delta of 60 units. They could do 208 versus 268, right? With the 16 dwelling unit per acre restriction. So you got 60. And it sounds like you're concerned with the future precedent of granting deviation, because density is such a hot topic right now. You've seen a lot of apartment complexes, you're going to see a lot more. So what I'm struggling with is I'm understanding, that's why I'm saying it's because of like, man, can I come up with some way that passes my straight face test, which I'm the one that gets the call, so my straight face test is very straight face. Like, I gotta be able to get yelled at and know that factually I'm correct. Is there a way basically to, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying if there was a way to protect the precedent issue, if there's a way to basically ensure that if this was written into the CDP somehow, like that, you know, that, hey, fine, you get your density, you get your additional density here, but you're taking it from, you're shifting it. You're, you know, classic thing is done in a lot of developments where we have some even that are density shifting arrangements. You're okay with the density shifting. I'm struggling because I just know it to be true from many, many hours of sifting through previous documents that when a restriction on some other phase is actually buried in phase 2, rather than the CDP or the zoning, and then conditioning approval of a PDP, that they come back with an amendment to the CDP, you know, to make sure that happens, then what happens if they don't? What happens if the recession kicks in and they're gone and it never materializes? I've been through all those scenarios and you're sitting there like, what do I do with this language? So I'm sorry to say it, but you have a planner sitting in this chair that's been down a lot of these paths before, and I just don't see a mechanism that will work, that won't just feel good tonight. And so that said, if you want my professional opinion, I'll go ahead and say it to great probably beating from somebody. I think that putting 60 additional units on this 12.7 acres with this project as proposed is fine. That's my professional opinion on this. Because if you have concerns about it, you could also mitigate this project with design mitigation. You could look at it and say, well, because you get 60 additional units, you have to do this, that, and that. Now, I offer that only as my professional opinion about this PDP and these 60 units and the additional units. I wasn't asked.
No, you were asked.
And that's exactly what I was thinking, because it's better if you're going to have density to strategically and intentionally place it so that it will work to our advantage. And in this situation, it sounds like it works. But
You guys
if,
know that if there's a special use permit, if there's a PDP, if there's something where I'm like, this is a bad idea.
Right.
I'll probably let you know at the podium, you know, like, but honestly, the proximity to everything, the arrangement, the design, the way it's being designed, it's not coming through in a way that only has the UDO standards, it's coming through as a PDP, so there's a lot of, it has to meet the CDP. This is an okay place to put additional density. You haven't had rioting in the streets about this particular project, and you know, and the soccer fields aren't going to care if there's a parking lot, if there's 60 more units there. Target and everybody that's with Target and you know all those other, they're definitely not going to mind 60 additional units right next door. The road is going to be there. It's a high quality road. It's a well designed road.
And it's also a parking. There's not enough parking for the apartment units, which takes me back to my question a second ago. This is before my time, but either Mr. Silverman or BJ, correct me if I'm wrong, we set a maximum parking, which Target asked for more parking. So you've got a sea of parking over to the left where Target is, and then no parking for this, not enough parking and too many units on this piece of land.
I can't talk about the parks on the Target side, we've reduced the parking.
You have taken it down. Okay, okay.
And on the apartment side, it doesn't matter the density, it's the number of parking spaces per unit, which is consistent with what Eagle Landing is that you approved. And they can get up here and tell you, that's open and they're not having any parking issues. So if you're adding more parking spaces, you should take a green space.
Great example of a precedent argument, which is one of our biggest fears.
What's that? Well, I understand what you're saying.
It's a great example.
I'm talking about parking. When I say precedent argument, parking
Just made one.
projects in Burlington, Garner, here, with Eagle Landing, the 1.7 thereabouts spaces per unit is sufficient.
1.61.
1.61 for this one. But, I mean, it's consistent, so I'm saying that parking is an issue everywhere. I mean, there's even, there have been reductions and eliminations in Raleigh's parking requirements, knowing that they don't necessarily have to be there. And I think staff will say that probably the requirements here that you already have, that needs to be re-examined because they're high. But the experience is that works well. I've also got a study that actually, and I can do that, that Travis has that Kinley Moore did, just showing on a national level is less than that per unit. But the 1.6 is reasonable, so Travis, if you don't mind me again.
It's the fact that we will be dictating where the density will be located. It will decrease the impact on the traffic all around because everyone's kind of right there in
Can't
proximity.
dictate the density in the future areas is the problem. I mean, Mr. Pate is on the money in that. We can't do it.
Yeah, I understand those implications about the future, but along with what BJ is saying, as far as, what can actually happen, we won't just allow arbitrary density to sprawl up around us, therefore causing everyone as an influx to come in and take advantage of our town and our infrastructures with our, police department and everything else.
Thank you. So I think one of my biggest concerns is, and I agree again with Mr. Pate, one of my biggest concerns is not just infrastructure, but it's also social infrastructure. And we know, and and we all know that every time we put in another multifamily dwelling facility, we are losing money in regard to social infrastructure, police, schools, things that are more a part of county taxes and less of city tax. And I understand that you guys are making an argument about the MSD and the fact that we need to generate the income in order to everybody reach their commitment regarding the MSD. But one of the most expensive things for us to do tax-wise is we're losing 42 cents for every dollar we're bringing in every time we have a social infrastructure issue, and those arise from multifamily dwellings. So I still feel pretty strongly that we should comply with the 480 units, and I appreciate Mr. Silverman saying, we may end up at 480. But if 480 is compliance with the UDO, which is there for a purpose, I think that the cap is a cap. It says up to 650. It doesn't say you absolutely have to build 650 units.
Which is exactly our point.
And I would love for you to agree to 480.
Which is exactly our point. It's up to 650 and 16. You approve this with a deviation because of where it is. Mr. Murphy just mentioned that, where it is, it makes sense to do that here. BJ said that. So do it here with a deviation, but keep in mind that going forward, when approvals are made, you keep the other part in mind that you're limited to 408. That's exactly what we're saying.
And are you willing to agree to a total of 480?
We can't do that.
Exactly.
We can't know because that would take an amendment to the CDP. So we can't.
Mr. Silverman, are you willing to agree to 480 total for the entire property?
Yes, ma'am, that's the 16 units, correct?
So,
It's already written.
I know.
Can I ask a question real quick? Since we know that the CDP was approved on an error, have you ever seen the total, the 650 units that's up for debate, which is causing everyone great discomfort? Have you ever seen a situation where we could go back and adopt an amended written decision so that they could clarify that there shall be no more than these 400 units that we're talking about, so that that mechanism is in place for the future phases?
As I understand it, legally, the way to restrict it to that is simply to enforce that limitation when something else comes up.
Right.
No matter how many units you put on this particular parcel, there's still an upper limit for the entire area.
There is. I know they're just uncomfortable with the fact that that 650 is in there and is on record. And so I'm trying to find a way that can give them some comfort tonight that we can also go back and kind of, they wouldn't have adopted that written decision based on 650 had they known that the math didn't work. So I'm wondering if we could adopt an amendment or a clarification to that CDP written decision.
So CDP is a legislative matter. It would have been adopted by ordinance. The written decision is a product of the quasi-judicial process. I don't know, I don't have a good response to that. I can't think of a mechanism to facilitate it. I understand what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense. you have, I think to Doug's point, if you grant 60 additional units on these 13 acres, 12.7 acres, 13 acres, and then you hold the balance of the mixed use and residential land to the 16, it puts you at 543, not the 650. So you're dropping it 100 units just by never granting another deviation. We don't know when it'll be before the town council, so we don't know what town council it would be consist of. Maybe who knows what they'll decide in the future. Again, I think it comes down to the matter at hand is the additional 60 units appropriate on this property being granted to this PDP, if it is or if it isn't,
I have a question. I know you said it's clunky, it's not great, and it buries a limitation or a condition in phase one where there could be 10 phases.
Yeah.
But if that's our only remedy to try to voice and put down something that's been relayed to us, that may give me some, at least, pause to allow what we're looking at. Does that hold any weight?
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. Number one, in a PDP, because it's quasi-judicial, under North Carolina statute, the applicants have to agree to the condition. So we gotta check that box. They gotta say they're okay with it. If you want to put a condition on the PDP that, this is where I step aside and say, hey, look, it's clunky for the future, it's administratively difficult. But it is true that if somebody finds it in the future and sees that this was a restriction on phase one, they're gonna put that paperwork in front of whoever's developing phase 6, 7, 8, whatever, and it'll have relevance. For example, it'll go into a staff report, and the staff report will come to the town council and it'll be assessed. I have said all I need to say about it, so I won't repeat myself. But if a condition along those lines, I'm not gonna jump up and down and hoot and holler at this point. Like, I think I understand what you're saying, and if it gives comfort, then that's important.
Well, do you have what you propose as wording for a condition, and you can say yea or nay?
I mean, I just think if, per what Mr. Silverman indicated, if he's willing, and here's my other question. So I know this applicant is only for this specific project, and I assume is Mr. Silverman the sort of the voice for the
whole project.
I'm struggling with who's the totality and who's this one thing, and they kind of are related, but they're different. If the totality entity, in conjunction with what's being asked, would agree that, what the number is, 484, or if we rounded it to even 485 or whatever, is the cap for multifamily units for the totality of the Morgan Park South plan, I'd be comfortable with that.
What if he did this?
Well, I think Mr. Silverman wants to say something. He's,
Okay.
okay.
Here's what I suggest. See if this helps. Just state that you're approving the deviation, but you're approving the deviation on the basis that going forward, the number of units will be limited to, 483 or whatever it is. Just say that you're approving the deviation with the expectation that going forward, the number of units in
Total
the
number of
CUP will be
units.
480. So it gives you an explanation for doing what you're doing for the deviation, doesn't create a precedent, and it gives the message going forward, this is what we did.
It also creates the issue that BJ warned us about, where people are going back to refer to what happened in the first one. But Mr. Silverman, I have a question for you. Do you have, are you overseeing every one of the parcels?
Yes,
Okay. So is there some way that you, and I intuitively trust a man who'll stand there and tell me he made a mistake, so thank you for that earlier this evening. But is there a way that you think we could be comfortable with a total 483 units instead of, and it changed the cap from 650 to 483? Is there a way that you've seen in your vast experience that would make that possible?
I think it's a combination of two things. I think it's what Mr. Johnson suggested. A motion, if you are inclined to do so, contain that clarification. And secondly, we would be happy putting a letter in file for planning that acknowledges that the number is the lesser of 650 or 16 units per acre, which based on that plan is 480.
I'd like 483 specifically to be stated, and that becomes the new cap.
as well as we can right now.
Okay.
Well, we all have to be creative in what we do. but,
That's all right.
I would suggest that works if we're amenable to that.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to move anyway? We have a sidebar over here, apparently.
Where were they?
Mr. Silverman? Just, I thought I'd mention it since we're all here talking about it. Is there no way that you can give Mr. Johnson and this project more acreage of the entire unit, of the entire development, so that the additional acreage that they build or they bring to us has a much lower average, so that when you combine it with this one at another meeting, it does meet the 16 per acre?
Could not, I would love to tell you, yes, we could do that, just move the land over, but the tax revenue issue that for the town and for.
But I mean, you're essentially saying that another part of this is going to be built that's going to be below the 16 per acre, because we're bringing the whole average down. We put more over here, so it's going to be lower somewhere else, right?
Yeah, but that's somewhere else, may not be multifamily, it may be office, maybe.
I'm okay with that. They can build office with multifamily on top of it.
It would be tax generating, it would be tax revenue generating. So if we say we're gonna take 4 acres of property, just.
Not 4, because I want the average to come down to 16 at this point. So we're going to have to add like 10 more so that when you add the 10 with this 13 and divide it by the 269 or whatever the units are. I'm finding a way for the average to be 16. Is there any way you can get the average to 16?
I think we do that by reducing the total count from 650 to 4.
We just don't see it now.
3.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
all right,
you effectively have done that.
okay. Yeah, if you all are comfortable with that, I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. So we need to vote on if the application is complete. Looking for a vote to adopt attachment A.
Oh, yeah, we need to
Sorry?
close the public hearing.
Close the public, excuse me.
Actually, just, if I may, I'm sorry, a couple housekeeping things. This was handed out. Do you mean that this is?
Yes, I'm sorry, that's the parking study.
Right. So is this the immediate
I would like to move that in the record.
Exhibit
Parking study that substantiates.
A,
what we're asking for.
T?
D.
D as in dog? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Does have anything he needs to say about this?
It's just that is a national average, which is much less than what we're asking for. And what we're asking for is consistent with these landings, consistent with other developments in the region it's never had, including Burlington, including Martin. That's roughly the 1.6 to 1.7 is how they're parking it. Parking spaces per unit. Yeah, it is. And this is national information using a national standard that shows that that is reasonable.
Okay.
And I would just recommend that one last time you ask if there's anyone in the audience, because it is a public hearing, and lay people may give facts, experts may give opinions.
Correct. I see Travis is here. Do you have anything to say since you were? Okay.
Answer any questions.
Okay, fine. Does anyone in the audience want to speak on this? Seeing no hands or people, I need a motion to close the hearing.
I'll move to close the hearing.
Second.
Pleasure of the council. I'm looking for a motion to adopt attachment A of the PDP.
I'll move to adopt attachment A, the staff report as drafted as findings of fact regarding the proposed preliminary development plan for PDO 722.
Second.
Pleasure of the council.
Okay, so Bill, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Your motion includes adopting the plan. Does it also include the language, the 483?
I think that'll be the next thing.
Okay, all right.
This is just to make sure the application is complete.
All right.
Pleasure of the council.
Aye.
Aye. Now, we are looking to adopt with the condition of PD 0722.
I will move to approve the preliminary development plan for PDO 722 with the following approval conditions. That the approval is on the basis that the maximum number of multifamily dwelling units for the entire CDP be capped at 483 units.
Second.
Pleasure of the council.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Just did everything BJ didn't want us to do.
Why don't we take a 5-minute or 10-minute break?
Still love it, but that's all right. I still feel like they can still divide up the land and get like a smaller acreage and cram 20 units per acre on there and be like,
Let's get back to it, gang. We're now at the action item. Sorry, a little sidebar again. Sorry. The action items, the U.S. House of Representatives designated July as Parks and Recreation Month. I signed the proclamation at the agenda meeting, and of course Beth did such a beautiful job framing it and matting it. We are fortunate to have Cindy King and her staff with us. She is just like the ever-ready bunny. Her enthusiasm and her imagination, I'm in total awe. And I want to thank you for all you're doing and all you've been doing and all that you plan to do for this community. And now it is my privilege to hand you this, and I've been told I have to read it out. So, yes. Proclamation declaring July as Parks and Recreation Month in Southern Pines, North Carolina. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of communities throughout our country, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health and wellness, providing the physical and mental health of people who live near parks, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being, and alleviating illness such as depression, attention deficit disorder, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourage physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Parks and Recreation programming and education activities such as out-of-school time, programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical to childhood development. And where Parks and Recreation increases the community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of local tax base, increased tourism, and the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Parks and Recreation is fundamental to the environmental well-being of our state, and whereas parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our state and provides a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. Whereas local parks in our state generate over $6 billion in economic activity and provide over 37,000 jobs, ranking North Carolina as 10th in the nation. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the state of North Carolina recognizes and benefits derived from Parks and Recreation resources. Now, therefore, it is to be resolved by the Southern Pines Town Council on the 12th day of July, 2022, that July is recognized as Parks and Recreation Month in the town of Southern Pines, North Carolina. This is going to Thank you. And none of you all saw this now. That's very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Great job. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you. You are really, you're ready, buddy, I swear. Thank you all so much. Thank you. All right. And now we're looking at AR 1622, which we heard at our agenda meeting. Does anyone have any questions about that one? This is Ace Hardware.
I did, Jennifer was not able to be here tonight. She did follow up. The applicants did submit revised calculation excluding windows and doors.
Okay.
Those numbers are shown on the screen here. She put together this PowerPoint slide for you. The north elevation, this is facing Airport Road, is in fact 78% brick. The east elevation is 69% brick. The west elevation is 75% brick. And the south elevation, which is not street facing, is all concrete masonry units, CMU, which is not considered brick.
I appreciate it, yeah. That's where it echoes. We thought it was really close, and so that sort of verifies that.
Yeah.
And BJ, does the trail go behind this building? The one that connects?
It does. It comes off of Olive Tree Lane, goes behind this building, and then cuts north. And originally, it was going to go up and it was going to connect to the Arboretum at San Jose State. However, couldn't get an agreement for that access. So instead, it's going to go up and it's going to end at Airport Road.
Okay.
You guys may know that the Greenway is not too far away from there. You can actually access it from the front left corner of O'Neill.
And do we have any control over making, since there's a trailway or a path, walking path behind there, is there anything that controls just the appearance of the back since it's a walkable area?
Nothing regulatory at this time.
Okay.
Honestly. Interestingly, this CDP does require that buildings in front of the ACE have four-sided architecture. So you can't have a back-of-house type of steel doors and CMUs. But this structure does not have that requirement because it faces the forest and the trail.
Okay.
Great question.
Okay.
Something we should consider maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'll maybe mention it to Randy.
that's the back of it.
He's very accommodating,
Okay, thank you.
since he has what, a enormous greenhouse, and maybe he's got some plants floating around.
Does, yep. Thank you for coming up with the numbers or
Yeah,
for bringing those to us.
appreciate yeah,
I'll pass that along to Jennifer. She did a good job of that.
yes, and hope she feels better.
So I'll make a motion to approve
I was
AR-16-22.
looking for him. Pleasure of council.
Aye.
Aye. The next is AR 1822. This is one had no deviations at all. It was completely and totally compliant. So it's a Discount Tire. It's the corner of West Morganton Road and Brucewood. So, excuse me, that's not true. It's where Sand Hills Urgent Care used to be. Yeah. My computer went crazy. So I'm looking for an approval of AR 1822.
I'll move to approve AR-18-22.
Second.
Pleasure to council.
Aye.
Aye. The next is AR 1722, Old Morganton Park South out parcel. A 7,000 square foot multi-unit retail, corner of West Morganton Road and Brucewood.
Yeah, so this was, you guys will also recall, this was another one that you guys had requested some revised calculations.
Right.
This is the front of that building. Again, this is the, just to refresh your memory, this is the location that empty space. You can see it's already built out, the road ready to go. This infrastructure was in place a long time ago. The building will be oriented roughly the same as this structure right here. It's not going to look all that different than this structure right here. And here is the front-facing facade. Here is the right side, the east elevation, the west elevation. In the rear, this will be facing Morganton Road. He actually put together calculations where he calculated out, took this out, and so basically it was the parapet cornices, sign area, and the canopies were portions that were not brick, were also not windows and doors.
Right.
And the percentages he came up with were the brick on the front was 57%, the left side facing Brucewood was 82%, right side was 79%, and the rear facing Morgan was 79%.
Do you want to show the audience what they're kind of mirroring? Can you have that, when you pull up where, is
Hey,
it
BJ, I still think that number's wrong on the front.
Yeah, it looks low.
Pure Bar? Just that's what it's being mirrored to.
Yeah, so you talk about the front facade? Yeah, so this is, you can see, it's, what he submitted to us was total area of exterior wall, not including doors and windows, is 1,404 square feet. Brick area shown is 804. 804 divided by 1,404 is 57% brick.
Sorry, am I seeing the numbers wrong? My eyes are terrible. Is that math right?
Hold on, let me divide one.
I wish this was in our packet.
Somebody recalculating it. My phone is in my purse.
That's 7% brick.
But it's 82 on the other side.
How could that be more brick? How could you get 80% brick? Like, that's my concern, is that we're saying we want 80. I don't see a way that you make that 80.
We talked about that we need to really look at that, because we have so many deviations with 80% brick, that we're going to have to change that, because you can't get there. I mean, he's got glass.
Material on the top, those top bars, like the cornice, whatever it's called.
I mean, how do you get, you're right, there's no way to get to. Well, we talked about that too.
It's not relevant to this application. I feel like I want to have, at least start that conversation, because it brings up an issue that is recurring that we deal with, which is requesting the deviations at 80%. And you can see we're not happy about deviations, but I don't see, I don't see a way to get to 80.
But I'd rather err on the side of too much and grant deviation than say, oh, I'm tired of deviations, we'll make it 40%, and then
But
we
look
get some
at the other
crazy looking
numbers
stuff.
are kissing 80.
One is above.
So I guess
I'm looking for an approval of AR 1722.
I'll move to approve AR-17-22.
I second.
Pleasure of the council.
Aye.
Which brings us to our consent agenda. Requesting voluntary annexation, setting the hearing for the 9th of AX-02-22, and approval of the minutes for June 8, 15, and 27. It takes one motion to approve the consent agenda.
Any questions?
Any questions? No?
To approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Pleasure of the council.
Aye.
With that being said, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Council.
I astonished.
We stand adjourned.
That has never happened.